Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of A Game and a Chair brought to you by the American Civil War Gaming Club. My name is Blake, I'm the host here on this show. If you have any questions about the American Civil War Gaming Club, you can always put them down in the comments below, or you can check us out at acwgc.net for more information. In today's episode, I'm going to do some more of my top picks, and in this instance, I'm going to do the top 5 mistakes that I see people making in games. I make these mistakes, I think we all do occasionally, but these are probably the top 5 that I see on a consistent basis. And no matter how many times I see them, or if unfortunately I make them myself, it just kills my soul a little bit on the inside because these are all avoidable mistakes. So let's get into it. The number one mistake that I see people making is they are simply not protecting their artillery batteries. This is usually a mistake that newer members make because they're used to the computer AI that doesn't go crazy whenever they see unprotected artillery batteries. But when you play against a human, when we see unprotected artillery batteries, we go into a trance, and we must have those guns, because you're just leaving points on the table that we can easily take. Artillery units are high-value pieces on the board, and they are always at the top of everyone's target list within a game. Now that doesn't mean you should always have infantry units sharing the hex with them. If the guns are well behind your lines and they are 100% safe to the best of your knowledge, it's okay to leave them unprotected, as long as you have infantry somewhere nearby. But if your opponent can reach your guns in a single turn, they should have immediate infantry support, either in front of the guns, blocking all direct routes to the guns, or with the guns within the same hex. If you do that, your opponent's not going to be nearly so happy. They're probably going to be pretty disappointed that you've rectified the situation. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about when I say that you should perhaps defend in front of your guns. So the effective use of zone of control is one of the easiest and surest ways to protect your artillery pieces near the front lines. If the enemy can't reach your guns, they can't take them. So if you are able to defend in front of your guns and utilize all these different zone of control blocking areas, you can prevent all of that. Here the federal units have done that. They've blocked all the different avenues of direct assault against their artillery pieces for this turn. Of course, there still could be unseen units nearby which can hit your artillery pieces, but on the whole, this is a very safe way to protect your artillery. If the enemy can't reach them, they can't take them. The other way to defend artillery is actually defending within the hex itself. If you can't necessarily block all direct routes to the guns because of zone of control issues, then you must either completely fall back or defend the hexes directly, which is a bit more risky, but sometimes it is the only option. Here the federal units have placed infantry support within the same hexes as the artillery units. And these hexes should always have at least 500 men within them to guard the artillery. If you have less than that, it's not ideal, but it's not necessarily something that you can't get away with occasionally. But if you have 500 men with the guns in the same hex, it's going to make it really hard for any attacker to take and overrun that hex. So 500 men in a hex with artillery should be the rule of thumb. Another of the top mistakes that I see people make, not knowing when something isn't working. We've all seen this, and perhaps we've been guilty of it from time to time. Sometimes ideas and attacks, they just don't work out. And when that happens, you need to recognize it and change your strategy. Don't just keep doing the same thing over and over again if it's not working. Otherwise, it begins to play out like a Monty Python sketch. And if you get this reference, good. If you don't, do yourself a favor and watch Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail, and the Black Knight analogy will make so much more sense to you. Because this is how I feel sometimes in battles when I watch an opponent just repeating the same mistake. They just keep getting injured worse and worse. They keep losing parts of their army until finally they have nothing left. And usually they'll then say, well, how about a draw? Why don't we just call this a draw? And I'm like, I've been beating the crap out of you for the last 28 turns and you want to draw? I don't think so. So that is my analogy with people repeating the same mistake over and over again. Know when you have a problem and address it before you get to the extreme point of having no arms and legs. All right, another one of my top mistakes I see people making is facing the wrong way. No matter how many times I see it, I still can't quite believe it. And yet, people do it enough to where I have to put it on this list. I don't know if people are rushing through their turns sometimes and they just don't look at the units, but I have legitimately been charged, like Pickett's charge type of situation, by units facing the opposite direction. I don't even know how that's possible. How do you march across a field with your units facing away from me and not realize it? You should never rush that much. Take the time to make sure your units are facing the right direction. You would think that'd be pretty self-explanatory, and yet I've seen it enough times to justify putting it on this list. All right, the next most common mistake I see is people overstacking defensive hexes. And it always makes me chuckle because there is a point where overstacking defensive hexes is just wasteful. No sane opponent will attack a defensive stack of 800 plus men. You're just wasting resources. If you want to stack your hexes with 1,000 men when you're attacking, cool, I have no problem with that. I might do the same. But if you're playing defensively, this should not be something that you do. Defensively, you only need to have about 500 men per hex. That should be your maximum limit. Anything above that number, and really, you're just overstacking the hex. That can cause multiple routes if one of those units routes, and it also shortens your overall line and reduces the number of reserve units that you have behind that front line. So don't overstack defensive lines. 500 men should be about your limit for your frontline defenses. All right, the last thing here to talk about is defending poor positions. And I get that everyone has a different interpretation of what is and isn't a poor position, so there is some room for debate here. But I'm talking about the really obvious poor positions that I see people defend that just don't make any sense, such as a situation like this, where, congratulations, your line is unassailable. You have high ground, you're in the woods, maybe you've built some breastworks, you have artillery there. There is no feasible way I can frontally attack this position with any expectation of success. Unfortunately, you've chosen a position that is completely untenable. There are roads going completely around your flanks, your artillery can't retreat if necessary, your supply wagons are caught in the woods. There is nothing about this position that is good. It is definitively an awful position to defend because you have no way to exit the area. A defensive position should always have an escape plan. Don't do this to yourself. Don't defend poor positions because an experienced opponent will never attack this frontally. They're just going to outflank you. They might even isolate you in this position. Defensive lines are really more complex than just simply occupying the best hexes in terms of modifiers. This defensive line here is a great example. They've used all these different modifiers to make their line unassailable. But strategically, it is an incredibly vulnerable line that's going to be very easy for the Confederates to eventually attack, capture, drive off, whatever. This line is not going to last long. So those are the top 5 mistakes that I see people making in these games. If you guys have any others, you can feel free to put them in the comments down below. As I said at the beginning, I've made all these mistakes. I think everyone has made these mistakes. It's just part of playing these games. And the longer you play, hopefully, the fewer times you'll make these mistakes, but they still do occur. Alright everybody, thank you for watching this video. As always, I hope you appreciate it. If you did, be sure to like the video on here and also subscribe. When you do that, you'll get notified when future videos drop and you can stay up to date with all things American Civil War Gaming Club. Until next time everyone, just remember, keep gaming.